Leonardo da Vinci was born on April 15, 1452, near a town called Vinci in Italy. He was the son of a lawyer and a peasant. After his birth, his mother married another man, while his father became da Vinci's guardian. Since Leonardo grew up at his father's home, he had access to texts owned by his father and was exposed to his father's painting tradition. When Leonardo was around 15, he became the apprentice of Andrea del Verrocchio in Florence. Even as an apprentice, Leonardo demonstrated his colossal talent. For example, Leonardo got to paint an angel in Verrocchio's artwork called Baptism of Christ. Da Vinci's painting was so much better than his master's that Verrocchio allegedly resolved never to paint again. In 1482, he moved to Milan to work for the ruling Sforza family as an engineer, sculptor, painter, and architect. He worked for this family for around 17 years. From 1485 to 1490, Leonardo produced studies on loads of subjects, including nature, flying machines, geometry, mechanics, municipal construction, canals, and architecture, designing everything from churches to fortresses. His studies from this time period also had designs for war machinery, such as tanks and combat vehicles. Also, during this period, Leonardo produced his first anatomical studies. Since Leonardo's interests were so broad, he usually didn't complete what he started. Over the course of 17 years, he only completed 6 works of art, including the Last Supper. Leonardo lived in Milan till it was invaded by France in 1499, and only left when the Sforza family was forced to flee. He moved to Florence, and during his time in Florence, he painted several portraits, but the only one that survives is the famous Mona Lisa. In 1506, Leonardo moved back to Milan and lived there till 1513, which was followed by 3 years in Rome. In 1517, he moved to France when the French king Francis I invited him. He died there on the 2nd of May, 1519. Though he was influenced by the writings of the ancient Greeks and the Romans, Leonardo saw the limitations of testing his theories and seeking the truth only from those writings and the Bible. This was one of the things which made Leonardo different from other scientists of the Renaissance. Instead, Leonardo took to observing nature and asking simple questions such as, how do birds fly? He collected data and found solutions by sketching in his notebook. Leonardo had an uncanny ability to observe nature and to record it all down using sketches and writing notes. Even in his artwork, Leonardo uses his scientific observations made from nature to make his art perfect. Leonardo was also influenced by Vitruvius. Vitruvius was a Roman architect, engineer, and the author of De Architectura, which was a handbook for Roman architects. In the 1st century BC, Vitruvius proposed that a human body could fit inside a square and a circle. In 1487, Leonardo rediscovered Vitruvius' theory and put them into form, thus creating the Vitruvian Man. The Vitruvian Man is Leonardo's most famous drawing. About Vitruvian Man, Toby Lester, an author and journalist, said, at a superficial level, Vitruvian Man is simply a study of individual proportions. But it's also something far more subtle and complex. It's a profound act of philosophical speculation. It's an idealized portrait in which Leonardo, stripped down to his essence, takes his own measure, and in doing so, embodies a timeless human hope that we just might have the power of mind to figure out how we fit into the grand scheme of things. Leonardo da Vinci was a multifaceted man, and so he made many contributions to different fields. He made many contributions to art. Leonardo was apprenticed to Andrea del Verrocchio, who specialized in perspective. Leonardo quickly mastered his skill and soon surpassed Verrocchio, but he sought a universal language in painting. He tried to portray real-life experiences using realistic elements such as perspective. In a culture previously dominated by highly figurative and downright strange religious paintings, Leonardo's desire to paint things realistically was bold and fresh. Before the Renaissance period, the art was influenced by religion and God. Leonardo changed this by painting earthly, realistic things. This call to objectivity became the standard for painters who followed in the 16th century. This shows that Leonardo influenced other artists and Renaissance thinkers to step away from the status quo of painting religious things. From unrealistic religious paintings, art came down to become people and nature-oriented. Leonardo da Vinci was also the first artist to use value consistently across colors, achieving tonal unity in which a figure presents a single, swelling, homogeneously generated volume, in contrast to the inevitably fragmented effects of color modeling. For example, in his artwork Benoist's Madonna, Leonardo used many shades to paint the picture. Mary's dress is blue, but you can see the black and white colors on it too. This usage of luminance was called chiaroscuro. Also, to make his artwork more realistic, Leonardo turned to science. He was able to use his study of anatomy and nature into his artwork. He was the first artist to study the physical proportions of men, women, and children, and he used his studies to determine the ideal human figure. Leonardo also experimented with oil paints. Traditionally, Italian artists used a mixture of egg yolk or white and pigment as paint. This mixture wasn't good because it dried too quickly and it also cracked a lot. By mixing the pigment in oil, Leonardo discovered a more versatile color, which could be built up in layers or painted over in order to cover mistakes. An art technique introduced into painting by Leonardo was the sfumato or smoky technique. This technique is used to soften the outlines and blur the shadows. This technique is more clear in the upper portion of the painting, usually the face. In Leonardo's work, the landscape is also blurred. In addition to making contributions to painting, Leonardo made many contributions to science. He bridged the gap between the shockingly unscientific medieval methods and our own trusty modern approach. Leonardo was interested in many fields of science, including anatomy, zoology, botany, optics, aerodynamics, and geology. He always followed the same method for scientific inquiry: close observation, repeated testing of the observation, precise illustration of the subject-object or phenomenon, with brief explanatory notes. He influenced our modern approach of scientific inquiry. According to Science Daily, the modern method of scientific inquiry is based on gathering observable, empirical, and measurable evidence subject to specific principles of reasoning, the collection of data through observation and experimentation, and the formulation and testing of hypotheses. He also made a huge contribution to the study of anatomy. Da Vinci's knowledge of human anatomy was unprecedented in his age. He used to dissect bodies to understand how the limbs, muscles, nerves, and joints depended on each other. However, since there were no preservatives, Leonardo had to work on the bodies for around a week while they were decomposing. Sometimes, he used to spend his nights digging graves for dead bodies to dissect and take apart. Leonardo made contributions to architecture and engineering too. He inspired later bridge builders with his method of bending wooden beams into arches. Leonardo created a technique of notching timber to stop the wood from splitting and interlocking bent and notched beams to create a bearing arch. Swiss bridge builders used Da Vinci's method when they created arch wooden bridges more than 300 years after Leonardo's death. There are many controversial opinions on whether or not Leonardo da Vinci had a lasting influence in his field. According to BBC, if all his work had been published in an intelligible form, Da Vinci's place as a pioneering scientist would have been beyond dispute. Yet his true genius was not as a scientist or an artist, but as a combination of the two, an artist-engineer. His painting was scientific, based on a deep understanding of the workings of the human body and the physics of light and shade. His science was expressed through art, and his drawings and diagrams show what he meant, and how he understood the world to work. However, an author named Michael Hart believes otherwise.
His talent and reputation seem greatly in excess of his actual influence upon history. In his notebooks, Leonardo left behind sketches of many modern inventions, such as airplanes and submarines. While these notebooks attest to his brilliance and originality, they had virtually no influence upon the development of science. In the first place, Leonardo did not actually build models of those inventions. In the second place, although the ideas were very clever, it does not appear that the inventions would have actually worked. It is one thing to think of the idea of a submarine or airplane. It is another and very much harder thing to work out a precise, detailed, practical design and to construct a model which actually works.